Okay, let's dive in. We're heading into some really fascinating, maybe even unsettling territory today. A place that truly stretches what we think we know about reality. Skinwalker Ranch.
It's definitely more than just a piece of land, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
become this global puzzle. We're talking about 512 acres, kind of tucked away in Utah's Uintah Basin.
Which already has its own reputation, right? People call it UFO Alley.
Exactly. So there's this backdrop of strange sightings even before you get to the ranch itself. But the ranch, it's something else. It's not just one weird thing happening there. It's like a super concentrated hotspot for almost every kind of unexplained phenomenon you can imagine.
That's really the core of it, isn't it? When you dig into the sources, it's not just, oh, someone saw a light. No, the reports cover this incredible range. You've got UFOs, or UAPs, as we often call them now. You've got encounters with really bizarre creatures, cryptids. Then there are these deeply disturbing animal mutilations. The descriptions are just chilling.
Yeah, surgically precise, bloodless, not like anything predators would do.
And then there's the tech side. Constant electromagnetic interference messing with equipment. People reporting physical effects, psychological stress.
And even theories, pretty wild theories sometimes, about portals, like gateways to other dimensions opening up right there.
The sheer amount and variety of all this high strangeness packed into one spot. That's what makes Skinwalker Ranch stand out. It's just so unusual compared to other paranormal sites.
It really defies any simple explanation. Usually a place is known for ghosts or Bigfoot sightings or UFOs. Skinwalker seems to have the full menu, makes it incredibly hard to pin down or just brush off.
So that's what we're doing here. We've gathered a whole lot of source material, historical records, scientific reports, witness accounts, government documents, you name it. Our mission is to unpack the key claims, look at the history, the investigations.
And try to understand why. Why, after all this time, all this effort, we still don't have concrete, verifiable proof. What we end up with is this incredibly compelling, sometimes frustrating, collection of unsolved puzzles.
We'll trace it back, look at the indigenous history, the really intense modern reports, the attempts to study it scientifically, even the government's involvement.
And explore why it just keeps baffling everyone. It forces you to ask some pretty fundamental questions, really.
Okay, buckle up. We're heading into the Uintah Basin. To really get a handle on Skinwalker Ranch, you've got to start with the land itself, its deep roots. Way before the modern investigations, we're in the Uintah Basin, northeastern Utah. Pretty remote, big landscape.
And like you said, that UFO Alley nickname isn't new. It suggests people in the region have been seeing unusual things in the sky for a long, long time, well before the Hurmans bought the ranch.
And the historical records actually back that up, don't they? The sources point way back to 1776.
Right. There's the journal of a Franciscan missionary, Sylvestre Velez de Escalante. He was exploring out there, really early days for Europeans in that area, and he wrote about seeing these strange fireballs over his campfire.
Oh.
Yeah. Now, obviously, he's interpreting it through his 18th century worldview. Right. But it's fascinating historical evidence of something unexplained being seen in that specific vicinity centuries ago. It hints that maybe the area itself has some kind of inherent quality.
That manifests as weird lights, and people just label it based on their era.
It's a compelling thought. Does the phenomenon stay the same, but our labels change? From fireballs to flying saucers to UAPs or orbs.
It makes you wonder. And that history gets even richer and more complex when you bring in the indigenous perspective. That's absolutely crucial here.
Absolutely. The ranch property physically borders the Utah and Ouray Indian Reservation. That's Ute tribal land. So this place holds deep cultural and spiritual significance for the Ute people and other tribes in the region, too.
Which brings us to the name itself, Skinwalker Ranch. It's famous by that name, but it's important to understand where the term actually comes from.
Very important. Skinwalker is primarily a concept from Navajo folklore, the Dine people.
Yeah.
And the Navajo Nation is about 400 miles south of the ranch.
So the name is kind of imported.
In a way, yes. And understanding the Navajo meaning is key. A skinwalker, or Yinadlushi in Navajo, is a specific kind of malevolent figure. A witch, or sorcerer, basically.
Okay.
They gain supernatural powers, like shape-shifting often into animals, especially predators like wolves or coyotes, by committing some terrible act, usually killing a close relative. They're figures of immense fear, associated with illness, misfortune, death. Deeply taboo and serious in Navajo culture.
And how does that connect to the Ute land where the ranch is?
Well, there are historical accounts and legends about past conflicts between the Ute and Navajo tribes. Some stories, often brought up in discussions about the ranch, claim the Navajo cursed Ute lands or maybe even unleashed skinwalkers there after these conflicts. And the sources say that even today, some Ute elders tell stories related to these old conflicts and the presence of, well, unusual or negative forces in that area, even though the Yinad-Lushi isn't central to Ute beliefs like it is for the Navajo.
So the Utes have their own lore about the land.
Definitely. Ute tradition talks about certain places, springs, specific locations holding negative power, or being home to spirits that aren't necessarily friendly. There's an example near Bottle Hollow, a reservoir right next to the ranch on Ute land. Strange sightings there sometimes get explained through Ute beliefs about, like, evil sprites coming out of the water.
This whole intersection of cultures and beliefs, it raises sensitivity issues, doesn't it? Especially around the Skinwalker term.
Hugely important point. Many Native Americans, particularly traditional Navajo people, are very reluctant, even fearful, to discuss Skinwalker lore openly with outsiders. It's about protecting sacred knowledge, potentially dangerous knowledge, from being trivialized or misused. It's deeply taboo for many.
Right.
But sometimes, unfortunately, that reluctance gets misinterpreted by outsiders who are maybe too eager for a paranormal angle. They might see the silence as proof of how real and dangerous it is, instead of respecting it as a cultural boundary.
It's complicated. And then the name Skinwalker Ranch gets slapped onto this property by outsiders bordering Ute land using a Navajo term.
Exactly. It's been called cultural appropriation by some. Taking this really powerful, specific Navajo term and applying it broadly, potentially overshadowing the unique Ute perspectives about that specific land.
It shows how the story around a place can get shaped from the outside, maybe prioritizing the dramatic label over the local nuances.
Ultimately, though, this whole historical backdrop, the old reports of lights, the UFO alley reputation, the specific indigenous stories and warnings associated with the area, it creates this incredibly fertile ground.
Yeah.
So when weird things do happen on that ranch later,
People already have these frameworks, these stories to interpret them through.
precisely, whether the events have a normal explanation or not, they get filtered through these layers of history and belief, giving them a particularly potent, often unsettling meaning. It suggests the area might just be a place where strange things happen, and culture provides the lens to understand them.
Okay, so you've got this deep history, centuries of strangeness, specific folklore tied to the land, and then, bang, the mid-1990s. The ranch suddenly becomes this icon of modern paranormal investigation.
That's the pivot point. Enter Terry and Gwen Sherman in 1994. They buy the ranch, and sources say their motivation was pretty simple. Find a quiet place, run some cattle, get away from it all.
Didn't quite work out that way, did it?
Not even close. What they're reported experiencing over the next 18 months or so was just relentless. An intense, rapid succession of bizarre, terrifying events that basically turned their dream into a nightmare.
And the range of things they reported is just staggering. It really set the template for everything that came after. They talked about finding complex crop circles just appearing in their field.
Frequent UFO sightings, too. Different shapes, sizes, often very close. And then the cattle mutilations. Repeatedly. Systematic.
Those mutilations are so central to the Skinwalker story and, like you said, part of this bigger weird phenomenon. The descriptions are consistent, incredibly clean, surgical-like cuts, bloodless, often.
Yeah, specific organs removed with precision eyes, tongues, reproductive organs, udders, and the clincher, almost every time. No tracks. No signs of predators, no footprints, no struggle, nothing to explain how it happened conventionally.
That combination, the precision, no blood, no tracks, that's what pushes it beyond normal predation, right? Even beyond, say, human cult activity for most investigators on site, especially when it's happening alongside everything else.
Exactly. It gets woven into the overall high strangeness of the ranch.
But maybe the single most famous, almost legendary encounter from the Sherman time involves that wolf.
Ah, yes, the bulletproof wolf.
Yeah.
Terry Sherman's account is chillingly specific. He claims he saw this wolf that was just enormous. He estimated it 3 times the size of a normal one.
3 times.
That's the claim. And he says he shot it multiple times at close range with a .30 Euro 6 rifle, a powerful hunting round that should have dropped any normal animal instantly.
What?
But, according to his report, the bullet seemed to have 0 effect. The wolf just stood there, almost looking at him, unfazed. Then it turned, calmly walked away.
And then the tracks just vanished.
Yep. He tried to follow it, and the tracks just stopped cold, like it evaporated. That story, the bulletproof nature, the vanishing, is absolutely iconic for the ranch legend. It just completely breaks the laws of biology and physics as we know them.
And the Shermans reported other things too, right? It wasn't just the wolf.
Oh, no. They claimed sightings of other large unidentified creatures, even shadowy, tall figures walking upright bipedal humanoids. They heard disembodied voices, strange sounds from nowhere, things moving inside their house on their own, classic poltergeist stuff, and lots of sightings of those weird floating orbs of light, different colors.
It sounds absolutely terrifying, like living in a horror movie 24/7.
You could see why they couldn't take it. Sources say they were just completely overwhelmed mentally and physically. After about 18 intense months, they decided they had to get out. They put the ranch up for sale in 1996.
And crucially, they talked about it.
That was the spark. In June 96, they told their story to George Knapp, an investigative journalist in Las Vegas known for covering UFOs and the paranormal. His reporting blew the story wide open. That's when Skinwalker Ranch entered the public consciousness and caught the eye of researchers, and eventually others.
Okay, but here's the big counter-argument, the thing skeptics always point to, and the sources highlight it too. The family who owned that same ranch for 60 years right before the Shermans
Denied everything.
staunchly, repeatedly, said they never saw anything strange, paranormal, or out of the ordinary in all those decades living there.
It's a massive discrepancy, and you have to wrestle with it. Why 60 years of apparent normality? Then this sudden, insane 18 months for the Shermans. What changed?
Did the Shermans trigger something? Were the previous owners just not paying attention? Or maybe they saw things but explained them away differently? Or just kept quiet?
Those are possibilities. Or, and this is the skeptical take, maybe the discrepancy throws the Shermans' whole story into question. Critics like Robert Bigelow suggest maybe it was exaggerated, maybe psychological factors were huge fear, suggestion, or maybe, cynically, it was even fabricated to attract a buyer interested in the paranormal.
Like Robert Bigelow, who bought it right after the story broke. And skeptics note Terry Sherman stayed on as caretaker for a while after the sale.
Right, that detail gets mentioned. It's an unresolved conflict at the very start of the modern legend. That stark difference between the Shermans' terrifying accounts and the previous owner's flat denial is a major point of debate and a cornerstone of the skeptical argument against the ranch's supposed phenomena.
So the Shermans are out, their story is making waves, and almost instantly it attracts someone with very deep pockets and a very specific interest.
Yep, Robert Bigelow. Las Vegas real estate guy, aerospace entrepreneur, but also someone who'd poured millions into studying UFOs and the afterlife for years. He snapped up the ranch in late 1996, only about 3 months after Knapp's story broke. Paid around $200,000, reportedly.
And he wasn't just buying land. He had a plan.
A very specific plan. He wanted to investigate the Sherman claims using or trying to use a rigorous scientific approach. So he founded NIDS, the National Institute for Discovery Science, a private research group specifically set up for 247 surveillance and scientific study right there on the ranch.
He brought in scientists.
He did, people with credentials. Biochemist Dr. Colm Kelleher was the lead investigator. And again, it's worth noting, as skeptics do, that Terry Sherman, the source in the initial claims, was apparently employed there as caretaker for at least some of the NIDS period.
What was their approach? How did NIDS try to study this?
They aimed for what they called a standard scientific approach, as much as possible given the weirdness. Lots of surveillance cameras, video, infrared. They deployed instruments to measure radiation, magnetic fields, radio frequencies. And really importantly, the scientists themselves spent a lot of time living and working on the ranch, doing firsthand observation.
So they were right there in the thick of it. Did they see anything?
According to their own reports, absolutely. The NIDS team claimed they personally witnessed a whole spectrum of weird stuff, often mirroring what the Shermans described. UFO sightings, strange creatures, EM interference affecting their gear, poltergeist-type events. It's all detailed in that book, Hunt for the Skinwalker, by Kelleher and George Knapp.
That book had some wild stories. Kelleher's own sighting is one of the most famous. Right, March 1997.
Yeah, he reported seeing this large humanoid figure, said it had penetrating yellow eyes, perched way up in a tree, like 20 feet off the ground, just watching the team.
What happened?
Kelleher said he and others reacted. He fired his pistol at it, and the creature just vanished. Gone. Again, echoes of the Sherman Wolf story, physical presence, seems impervious, disappears impossibly.
Okay, so scientists on site, witnessing things firsthand, running equipment. Did NIDS finally crack it? Did they get the proof?
Well, that's the crucial part. Despite years of work, all of Bigelow's funding, and these reported firsthand experiences, NIDS ultimately concluded they failed to get conclusive, objective, physical evidence. The kind of evidence that would convince the broader scientific community.
Kelleher himself said that, didn't he? Something about very little physical evidence considered as conclusive proof.
Exactly. He acknowledged the difficulty obtaining evidence consistent with scientific publication standards. That failure is hugely significant.
Because this was a dedicated, funded scientific effort. Their inability to nail down solid proof is a big deal.
It leaves you with a few possibilities, all pretty mysterious.
Yeah.
Either the phenomena are real, but just incredibly elusive, maybe non-physical, maybe they react to being observed, maybe they're just beyond our current science to detect properly. Or the skeptical view. The lack of objective proofs means the events aren't objectively real external phenomena. Maybe they're misinterpretations, psychological effects, hoaxes, unreliable reports. NIDS eventually shut down around 2004, though Bigelow kept the ranch until 2016.
So the NIDS era, it added a lot to the story, especially through the book, brought more serious, if unconventional, attention. But it didn't solve it. In fact, their failure to get proof kind of deepened the mystery and gave ammo to the skeptics.
Right. It starkly highlighted the core challenge.
Yeah.
How do you scientifically study something that's reported to be interactive, maybe intelligent, potentially non-physical, and capable of just vanishing?
Yeah.
Was NIDS inadequate? Or were the claims just not solid? It left us with more questions than answers, really.
And then the story takes yet another strange twist. The work NIDZ, especially that hunt for the Skinwalker book, apparently caught the eye of the U.S. government.
That's the narrative, yeah. Sources like the book Skinwalkers at the Pentagon laid out pretty specifically. Apparently, a DIA Defense Intelligence Agency official, James Lukatsky, read Kelleher and Knapp's book.
Just read the book.
Got intrigued, and reportedly arranged through Bigelow to visit the ranch himself. And while he was there, the story goes, Lukatsky had his own weird experience. Something anomalous happened to him personally.
Wow. Okay.
And that personal experience, supposedly relayed by Bigelow to Senator Harry Reid, who was then Senate Majority Leader, that was apparently a key catalyst. Reid, along with Senators Stevens and Inouye, managed to secure funding for a secret DoD program to study UAPs.
So a personal experience by a DIA official on the ranch helped launch a government UAP program.
That's the claim. The program was called AAWSAP, the Advanced Aerospace Weapons System Applications Program, run by the DIA from about 2007 to 2012. Its official brief was broad, looking at potential threats from advanced aerospace tech, but sources confirm Skinwalker Ranch was definitely a significant focus within that research.
And who got the contract to do a lot of that research for AAWSAP?
Surprise, surprise, Robert Bigelow's other company, Bayes Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Space Studies.
So Bigelow owned the ranch, funded the private NIDS study, and then his company got the government contract to study phenomena, including those at his ranch.
Correct. And Bayes produced something like 100 technical reports for AAWSAP. These are the famous DRD's Defense Intelligence Reference Documents. They've become legendary in UAP circles because the titles are just out there. Really exotic, speculative stuff.
Give us some examples.
Oh, things like traversable wormholes, stargates, and negative energy, warp drive, dark energy, and the manipulation of extra dimensions, invisibility cloaking, detection and transient assessment of UFOs. Just reading the titles gives you a sense of the theoretical, almost sci-fi level thinking being explored.
Mind-bending. Any specifically related to the ranch experiences?
Well, there's DIRD 26 titled Anomalous Acute and Subacute Field Effects on Human Biological Tissues. And sources directly link the kind of research and documents like that to the weird physical effects, injuries, illnesses, cognitive issues reported by people, including investigators and security who encountered phenomena at Skinwalker Ranch and other places Bayes was looking into.
Now, people sometimes get AAWSP confused with 8-Tip, right? That later program Lou Elizondo was involved with.
Yeah, there's definitely been public confusion about how they related. If they were the same thing or sequential, it's a bit murky.
But regardless of the acronyms, the key takeaway is the U.S. government at the defense intelligence level was funding research that specifically included looking at what was happening at Skinwalker Ranch.
For a lot of people, that fact alone adds serious weight. It suggests something significant, maybe even worrying from a national security angle, was happening there and being taken seriously, at least by some, behind closed doors.
But again, just like NIDS, where's the public proof? Did AAWSP find the smoking gun?
If they did, it hasn't been clearly presented publicly in a way that resolves the debate.
Yeah.
The actual findings about what exactly was substantiated at the ranch remain contentious or classified.
And you've had skeptical voices from inside the government system, too. Sean Kirkpatrick, who headed the Pentagon's recent UAP office, AAR.
Right. Kirkpatrick publicly stated that the DIA essentially felt taxpayer money in AWSF was inappropriately spent on paranormal research at Skinwalker Ranch. So internal skepticism existed too.
It's a weird picture, then. Government interest, funding research exploring incredibly exotic physics concepts potentially related to the ranch phenomena, but still no public resolution, no definitive proof released, and pushback from within about the validity of it all.
The DIRD titles absolutely show they were willing to consider really radical ideas, wormholes, extra dimensions, weird energy fields, as potential explanations. But whether they found actual evidence for those things at the ranch, that's still very much part of the unsolved puzzle.
Yeah.
It shows the scope of the thinking, but not necessarily the substantiation.
Which brings us pretty much up to date. 2016, the ranch changes hands again.
That's right. Purchased by Brandon Fugel, another Utah real estate magnate. And like Bigelow, Fugel has a stated personal interest in the unexplained and was committed to launching a new phase of investigation.
And this is the era most people probably know best now because of the TV show.
Exactly. The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch on the History Channel starting in 2020. It's brought massive mainstream attention to the place.
The show features that core team, Dr. Travis Taylor, the astrophysicist leading the science side,
Eric Bard, the physicist handling the tech and data systems,
and Thomas Winterton, the ranch superintendent who's been there a long time and has had his own really bizarre experiences.
Their approach really leans heavily on deploying advanced technology. Ground-penetrating radar, thermal cameras on drones, LiDAR scanning, sensitive magnetometers, radio frequency monitoring, surveillance cameras everywhere. They've wired the place up.
And unlike NIDSci, which seemed more observational, this team, especially for the cameras, is very proactive, right? They're actively trying to poke the bear, so to speak.
Definitely. They launch rockets over hotspots. They transmit specific radio frequencies. They've even brought people in to perform rituals like Rabbi Ariel Bar Sadoc chanting, or a Native American drum circle specifically, to see if they can trigger a response and measure it.
And the show has definitely presented some moments that got people talking, that mysterious cow death in the first season.
Right, that was a big one. Young cow dies suddenly. They report radiation spikes near it. Someone saw an oval object in the sky beforehand. The cow was seen looking up right before it died. And then the carcass supposedly decayed really slowly and wasn't touched by scavengers for ages. Lots of weird details packed into one event.
They've also shown UAPs or other anomalies seeming to pop up right when they're doing these experiments, like during the chanting or the drumming.
There was that incident with the orb and the laser, too. Filmed an orb-like UAP rising up, they pointed a laser at it, and the orb seemed to follow the beam up before just winking out.
And maybe the craziest claim visually, that footage supposedly showing a UAP flying right through the solid rock of the mesa during a helicopter experiment.
Yeah, that one blew people's minds. Plus, they've shown issues with drilling into the mesa, hitting impenetrable barriers, finding weird metal fragments, rockets exploding mysteriously midair near anomalies.
Other findings they talk about, that persistent 1.6 gigahertz radio signal nobody can source, data suggesting some kind of dense mass inside the mesa, theories about invisible energy domes over the property.
It's a lot of intriguing data points presented. Now, of course, the show gets criticized, too, from a scientific rigor standpoint.
Right.
Critics say it prioritizes the drama, the speculation, maybe jumps to anomalous conclusions too quickly without fully ruling out mundane explanations or detailing the limitations of the methods. Entertainment versus pure science.
It's definitely a different dynamic than the NIDS era. NIDS was private, aiming for, maybe a quieter, more observational, scientific approach. The Fugel era is public, televised, interactive. They're actively trying to provoke things.
And the pressure to deliver results for TV, that has to influence how things are interpreted and presented, doesn't it? The focus stays on the mystery.
You could argue that. So paradoxically, even with all this cutting-edge tech, the Fugel era hasn't necessarily brought us closer to a final answer. In some ways, it feels like they're just uncovering more layers of weirdness, generating more questions, which, makes for good TV, but maybe keeps the ultimate resolution elusive.
Okay, so looking across all of this, the history, the Shermans, NIDS, the government hints, the current show, what really defines Skinwalker Ranch, is that incredible list of reported phenomena. It's like catalog of the unexplained, all in one place. Absolutely. Let's break down those categories because they really show the complexity we're dealing with. First off, the aerial stuff. UAPs, UFOs, whatever you want to call them.
And it's not just vague lights. The reports are specific. Classic flying discs, silent black triangles moving impossibly fast, quick darting lights, and those ever-present orbs.
The orbs are particularly fascinating. Witnesses describe them in various colors: blue, white, red, orange. They're seen floating through trees, sometimes seeming to follow people or vehicles. They reportedly interact with equipment. Some accounts even have them appearing to come out of the ground or go into solid objects like the mesa.
And sometimes they're linked directly to other events, right? Like seen around mutilations or reported just before someone experiences physical effects.
That interactivity is key. It suggests intelligence, or at least some kind of targeted energy, not just random lights or misidentified planes. That's what makes them so hard to explain away conventionally.
Going back to Escalante in 1776, his fireballs. It really makes you think, is this the same thing, just described differently over centuries?
It's a fundamental question. Are we seeing the phenomenon evolve, or just our labels and understanding? From fireballs to UFOs to UAPs to orbs, maybe even the tic-tac shapes reported by the Navy pilots share characteristics.
And the TV show keeps adding examples of UAPs showing up during rituals, interacting with lasers that alleged flight through the mesa.
Just reinforces this idea of something aerial, unexplained, and potentially interactive being a core part of the ranch's phenomena.
Then we move from the sky to the ground. The cryptids. The anomalous animals. This ties right back into the ranch's name, obviously.
And the most famous example is still that bulletproof wolf from the Sherman era. You just can't get past that story.
Let's recap the bizarre details. Huge size, multiple rifle shots doing nothing. It's calm departure, the track's just stopping.
It sounds completely impossible by normal biological standards. More like something from folklore.
Which is exactly how many people interpret these sightings, right? Through that Skinwalker lens, the shape-shifting sorcerer taking animal form, possessing supernatural abilities like invulnerability or vanishing.
And NIDS had their own creature sighting, too. Dr. Kelleher's humanoid figure in the tree, with the yellow eyes, that also vanished after being shot at. It fits that cryptid anomalous entity pattern.
The current team on the show reported finding that carcass they thought might be a prehistoric dire wolf, which, if true, is a major zoological anomaly itself, even if it's natural.
And then you get into the really, really weird anecdotal stuff from the NID's days mentioned in some sources. Things like a witness claiming to see a frog with an alligator mouth, or a big pig-like thing with a beaver tail and dinosaur spines.
Okay, yeah, reports like that. They push the boundaries of belief, even for people open to the paranormal.
They absolutely do. It's a challenge. How do you even process claims like that? Do they hint at something incredibly bizarre happening, maybe biological or dimensional weirdness we can't comprehend? Or are they more likely misidentification under stress, exaggeration, maybe even confabulation?
It really blurs the lines, doesn't it? Between tangible creatures, folklore interpretations, and maybe psychological effects. The bulletproof wolf is the perfect example described physically, but acting impossibly.
Is it an unknown species? Misidentification? Or something truly paranormal? The extreme reports, while hard to verify, definitely contribute to the ranch's reputation as a place where literally anything might be reported.
And then there are the mutilations. Deeply disturbing, persistent since the Sherman days.
The core characteristics are so consistent. Those precise, almost surgical cuts. Missing organs, eyes, tongues, sex organs often, little to no blood reported, and that baffling lack of tracks or any sign of predators or struggle.
The mysterious cow death on the show hit all those beats, but added more data: the suddenness, the radiation readings nearby, the reported aerial object correlation, the cow looking up.
That cluster of details around one event makes it much harder to dismiss as just a natural death or simple predation. It strongly suggests a link to the other anomalous phenomena.
Plus the reports of valuable animals just vanishing entirely, and ongoing strange injuries to livestock.
And it's crucial to remember, this isn't just a Skinwalker Ranch thing. These specific kinds of mutilations have been reported across North America, around the world, for decades, often linked to UFO sightings elsewhere, too. That wider context actually lends some consistency to the ranch claims.
But the context at Skinwalker Ranch amplifies the paranormal interpretation, right? Mutilations happening on property already known for UFOs, cryptids, energy fields, and sometimes directly linked in time, like the cow death event.
Exactly. It steers the explanation away from purely conventional causes and ties the mutilations into the ranch's bigger, stranger picture. The unsolved nature of the mutes here is inseparable from the ranch's overall paranormal reputation.
Moving beyond the visible, the invisible forces, EM interference, radiation spikes, poltergeist stuff.
The equipment malfunction is a huge one for investigators. Cameras dying, batteries draining instantly, instruments going haywire, vehicles stalling. Consistently reported by NIDS, government teams, the current crew, especially in certain hotspot areas.
It's a massive practical problem if you're trying to study the place scientifically. Your own tools turn against you, supposedly because of the phenomenon itself.
It creates this frustrating loop. Lack of reliable data can be blamed on anomalous interference, making it hard to get objective readings. You also get reports of specific environmental spikes, unusual magnetic field surges, especially around Homestead 2, leading to ideas like a magnetic vortex.
And radiation.
Sudden, localized spikes in radiation have been measured, sometimes coinciding with other events like animal deaths or UAP sightings.
And then the classic poltergeist activity, things moving on their own.
Reports of tools vanishing and reappearing, rocks being thrown seemingly from nowhere, doors opening or closing by themselves, hearing disembodied voices, whispers, strange sounds with no obvious source.
Plus weird mists. Fogs appearing suddenly, sudden cold spots.
Right. Now, these experiences, voices, moving objects, temperature drops, they're powerful for the witnesses, but incredibly hard to document scientifically in a way that rules out mundane or psychological causes.
Like hearing patterns in wind noise or heightened senses due to fear in a creepy place.
Exactly. Pareidolia, suggestion, stress.
Yeah.
They can all play a role. So the unsolved part here is tricky. Is it a real external force manipulating things, or a complex interplay of psychology, environment, and maybe misinterpretation? It's tough to separate those threads objectively.
And it's not just equipment or the environment being affected. People themselves report direct physical and psychological effects. The human body is part of the equation here.
Absolutely. Consistent reports across different eras and groups mention strange medical issues cropping up after spending time on the ranch. Sudden illnesses, severe headaches, cognitive problems like brain fog, memory lapses, disorientation, even weird skin conditions or lesions appearing out of the blue.
Thomas Winterton's head injury is probably the most dramatic recent example. That rapid swelling, the scalp supposedly separating. Doctors, apparently baffled.
A very bizarre and alarming reported incident. But maybe even more disturbing conceptually is the hitchhiker effect.
Explain that again.
It's this idea, based on numerous anecdotes from people connected to the ranch over the years, that the phenomena, or some kind of influence, can somehow latch on to visitors and follow them home. People report paranormal activity starting in their own houses, bad luck, ongoing negative psychological effects, sometimes miles and miles away, long after they've left the ranch.
That's deeply unsettling. It implies whatever is there isn't strictly localized. It's potentially transmissible, targeted.
It broadens the mystery exponentially and raises serious safety concerns for anyone involved in research there. If true, it suggests something sentient, or at least capable of directed influence beyond the property lines.
And this ties back to that government DIRD document, right? The one on anomalous field effects on human biological tissues?
Precisely. Sources like Skinwalkers at the Pentagon make that connection explicit. The fact that a government program was studying these kinds of effects linked to personnel experiences at places like the ranch. It doesn't prove a paranormal cause, but it shows the reported symptoms were taken seriously enough to be studied, framed as possible exposure to unknown energies or advanced tech.
So the unsolved piece, even for the government, seemed to be, what is the source of these fields or systems causing these biological effects?
And finally, we get to the most speculative, but maybe most alluring theories. The portals, interdimensional gateways, space-time warps.
This is the idea that tries to explain everything, right? The diversity, the sudden appearances and disappearances, things just popping in and out of our reality via these gateways on the ranch.
It's often proposed as a grand, unified theory for the ranch's strangeness. Hotspots like Homestead 2 or the Triangle area are often cited as potential locations for these supposed portals.
What's the evidence based on?
Mostly circumstantial stuff and interpretation. Witness reports of things vanishing instantly. That claim of a UAP flying into the Mesa Rock. Experimental data that gets interpreted through this lens.
Like the temperature drop during the rabbi's chant at Homestead 2, and that fleeting visual capture.
Yeah, or the LiDAR data over the triangle that some interpreted as a void, potentially matching theoretical models of wormholes, like those discussed in the DRDs.
Does this connect to any indigenous beliefs?
Sometimes parallels are drawn to Native American concepts of sacred sites being connection points to other realms or spirit worlds. There's mention of a Navajo ranger suggesting a rock spiral found there could represent a portal.
But scientifically speaking, this is the furthest out on the limb, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Interdimensional portals, traversable wormholes,
Hmm.
these are highly theoretical physics concepts, not something we can currently test or verify. So, by definition, the portal theory remains firmly in the unsolved category.
And it's a great example of how pre-existing beliefs can shape how you see ambiguous data. A weird temperature drop or a gap in LiDAR data becomes evidence of a portal because the portal idea already exists in the ranch narrative and wider UFO lore.
It shows how a theoretical framework can drive data interpretation, sometimes fitting the data to the theory rather than the other way around.
So we've laid it all out. Centuries of reports, the intense Sherman period, NIDS trying science, the government poking around, the current TV show with high tech, and this incredible list of phenomena: UAPs, cryptids, mutilations, weird energies, physical effects, portal theories. Yet why? Why is Skinwalker Ranch still such a profound mystery?
It really boils down to that persistent lack of hard, verifiable, repeatable proof, the kind of evidence that would satisfy mainstream science. NIDS couldn't get it. The government programs, as far as we know publicly, didn't produce it definitively for the ranch. The TV show presents intriguing data, but not the smoking gun that silences critics.
Which allows these two completely different narratives to exist side by side.
Exactly. For believers, the very lack of a normal explanation is the proof. It must be something extraordinary, maybe beyond current science. The sheer volume and consistency of reports over time from different people, plus the folklore, that's compelling in its own way.
And for skeptics.
For skeptics, the mystery persists because of that lack of proof, combined with mundane factors. Misidentification is huge. Could it be secret aircraft, natural phenomena, weird animals? Hoaxes or exaggeration, especially early on? And the power of psychology suggestion, confirmation bias, fear-altering perception in a place expected to be weird? No proof means no real phenomenon, just stories and misinterpretations.
It feels like Skinwalker Ranch has become this modern myth-making machine.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
A crucible where ancient folklore, dramatic personal stories, technology, government whispers, and media hype all converge. It creates a narrative that's bigger and more resilient than any single piece of evidence.
And maybe its unsolved nature is actually key to its power. Every new weird event, every ambiguous data point just adds another layer to the mystery instead of solving it.
Absolutely. It keeps people fascinated, keeps them guessing.
So maybe the biggest unsolved mystery here isn't just about finding the alien or the portal or the cryptid.
Perhaps it's also about understanding ourselves. How humans react when faced with something completely unknown, something deeply ambiguous that challenges our basic sense of reality. The ranch shines a spotlight on our need to find patterns, to create meaning, to search for answers when our understanding breaks down.
It leaves you, the listener, with the big questions, doesn't it? Is Skinwalker Ranch a genuine crack in reality, a window to something else? Is it a complex mix of folklore, environment, and psychology playing tricks on us? Or is it something entirely different, something we don't even have the concepts for yet?
Those questions are why the enigma endures.
Well, we've certainly covered a huge amount of ground today, unpacking the layers of history, the bizarre claims, the investigations surrounding the Skinwalker Ranch puzzle based on the sources we looked at.
It's undeniably a complex, multi-layered mystery that has really resisted easy answers for a very long time.
And the search for those answers. It continues. It really speaks to that human drive to understand the unknown, doesn't it?
It certainly does. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the truly unsettling enigma that is Skinwalker Ranch.